I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and welcome to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the leadership journey of our guest and what unique traits bring them to be the leader they are today. Who knows what we're going to discover together, so I hope you enjoy the episode. I'm delighted to be joined by Darren Sweet, founder of ipsodeckso.com. With almost a decade of experience in learning and development sector with specialisms in leadership, personal and team development, Darren has a passion for creating impactful learning experiences and has developed a digital card platform called ipsodeckso. It's a really exciting platform for coaches, trainers and leaders to use during virtual meetings and events to engage participants in super interactive learning and facilitated experiences. Now, Darren's mission is to make virtual meetings interactive, engaging and fun. So it's goodbye to death by PowerPoint, hooray, and welcome and a big hello to interactive leadership with ipsodeckso.com. Hello, Darren. Welcome to Game of Leadership.
Hi, Paula. Thanks so much for that introduction. That was a really cool introduction. And thanks so much for having me along. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're so welcome. I've been really looking forward to talking to you today. There's so much behind the man who has created what I can only say is the most exciting digital piece of learning that I've come across in a very long time. Now, what I have to say is that my digital experience is a little bit limited. However, I do know that you've got something super, super special in ipsodeckso.com. So I'm sure over the next few episodes, because we're going to have Darren with us for 3 episodes in total, we will get to know. Sorry?
I said, you poor thing.
Not at all, not at all. We're really excited to learn more about you and how you got to ipsodeckso. So in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at your leadership story, Darren, how you got to where you are today. So should we dig in?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Shall I start perhaps even before I got kind of into leadership and the early part of my journey and then kind of work forward from there?
That would be lovely to hear, because often our early years are what makes us, or part of what makes us who we are today. So that would be super.
Yeah, well, my early years are, I suppose, quite interesting from the point of view that I come from I wouldn't say deprived, but I suppose a financially not very strong background. And so it was, my early years were quite a struggle, if I'm being honest with you. It was going from kind of going to college and ultimately having to drop out because myself and my family didn't have the finances to be able to kind of finish my HND, and then going through various jobs and being made redundant quite a few times over the years due to kind of mergers and restructures and things like that. So there's kind of the combination of struggle in that respect, and also struggle with myself and with my own personality. Because I struggled quite a lot with my introversion and kind of fear of talking in front of people and kind of groups of people, and that held me back massively over the years. Until probably the most recent decade, really, it kind of held me back. So I'm coming from quite a difficult starting point, and then went through quite an interesting journey along the way, really, to get to where I am now. So it's been a weird one.
Oh, well, I mean, so many people really do struggle with that introversion. And, a lot of people won't realize, but I'm actually an introvert by preference. I can't help it. It's who I am. But, I prefer that sort of listening, stepping back, not being in the limelight. So, one of the things that I've had to really push myself to do is have this podcast to get myself visible, get myself out there. And, so many people really have these same sorts of feelings. So, tell us a little bit about the earlier years in your working life that sort of helped shape who you are today.
Well, the interesting thing is that I think, well, all this was going on with the struggling with my, I suppose, internal self, and some of that, the struggle that I've just kind of alluded to financially and things like that. Always in the back of my mind, there was this kind of nag saying, you're really creative and you can really do something and you can really kind of, create something positive. And then there's this kind of the other side of my brain going, no, you can't, you do that because, you're not in a position to do it. And, life will keep kicking you down. So there's this kind of internal struggle going on all of the time. And I went through sort of quite a few jobs until I ended up in housing association. And I was working for quite a number of years on the front line as a rent officer. And I had pretty much accepted that that was kind of all I was ever going to achieve. And I wasn't really pushing myself out of my comfort zone, which comes back to what you were saying earlier about you do need to push yourself. And so I'd been doing that for a number of years. And then a kind of, I suppose, a trigger point happened, which I'll talk about a bit later on with regards to this event that occurred. But ultimately, it led me into a move into learning and development, which was quite a transition from what I'd been doing before, because the job previously was kind of following processes and basically dealing with rent and numbers and customers. Okay. So then I was kind of back office and learning all different things around coaching and delivering training and doing facilitation and developing facilitation skills and training other people in facilitation skills. But it still started from a point of being afraid and almost having to prove to myself that I was able to do these things and kind of move myself through certain levels so that I'd feel more comfortable through each level to get to the point that I needed to get to. And also, whilst I was going through that journey, my love for learning and development and developing people just grew and grew and grew, along with the experience, essentially, which then led me to kind of where I am now. So it's been a really interesting journey, especially the last sort of decade, I suppose, within learning and development. So yeah.
Oh, I love how you just talked about pushing yourself that little bit more each time, Darren, because in the coaching world, which I come from, we talk about that comfort zone, and a lot in leadership as well, of course, when we talk about developing people, and that sort of core comfort zone, which is exactly that. It's lovely and comfortable, but where is the growth and the learning within that? So each time you push yourself a little bit more, and of course it feels scary, uncomfortable, all those things we don't like, but you can push through that into that growth and learning zone. That, of course, is where the magic happens. And as you described, I saw you visually sort of lift your hands up in incremental levels, that you make that little improvement each time. And I often talk about sort of ridiculously small steps with my clients, because they're so ridiculously small, you can't help but succeed and win with them along the way. So it is those small things that help you improve, and ultimately your comfort zone then gets that little bit bigger each time as a result.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie and say it happens overnight, that you do something that you're afraid of doing, and then once you've done it, it's like, yeah, that's easy now, because it doesn't work that way. But the more you do it and repeatedly do it and do those baby steps, then it's almost kind of a sliding scale, isn't it? That you've got at one end. I'm looking at the screen now to see which is left and right, because it's going up to one end of the scale is almost I can't do it. The other end of the scale is I can do it. And when you do move to here, and you've got, okay, I'm really afraid of doing this, and then you do it 3 or 4 times, that scale moves from here to maybe just behind. But when you move along again, the thing that came before is the thing that becomes much easier, and that self-belief just starts to grow. So yeah, I learned a lot during kind of that period. I still occasionally struggle with myself, I think, as everybody does to a certain degree, with confidence. But through I suppose, all of the different learnings that I had during that period, I realized that I could do things, and then I was able to start applying my creativity, which is what I kind of would regard as my major strength, to everything that I do. And when people start seeing your confidence develop as well, they start to kind of, I don't know, come to you and work with you more on things, and your network starts to grow as well, and you start developing your voice more, and I don't know, you just kind of start transferring all of that belief in yourself onto other people too, because you're developing those relationships at the same time. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, in particular in the last 10 years. But yeah, so I went into learning and development, and as you well know, most of learning and development in, I suppose, the yesteryears was done in the room or face to face, or a lot of kind of workshops. And within those workshops, I did some bizarre things in some of the team development workshops I did. I had people doing assault courses with kind of, pretend landmines and pretend kind of Mission Impossible type wires that they had to go through while they were blindfolded, and team members with whistles and duck whistle things that made different noises to communicate with each other, to work on communication. I've had people playing tennis with a balloon and cocktail sticks as their racket, and with little notes inside. All manner of things that I've done in these workshops. But the thing that I've loved about them is the interactivity that people have, and when they're kind of learning and developing together.
Yeah.
Which is something that when COVID-19 hit, a lot of that kind of moved to the online environment, and then I suppose a big learning curve again for everybody, particularly within learning development and leadership, when people are kind of running meetings and things, to create that interactivity, which is why I kind of started moving towards my mission, which is to make virtual meetings interactive, engaging, and fun.
Yeah, so really, as much as COVID-19, the global pandemic, caused so much heartache globally, so much difficulty and trouble and almost chaos in some areas of politics and all of that, while we were trying to settle down and understand exactly what was going on. A lot of businesses have suffered through that in terms of, not getting so much business. But for others, such as yourselves, you've been able to find a way to navigate through that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, when I was doing interactive workshops, one of the tools that I used to use in interactive face-to-face workshops was decks of cards. I used to find that they were a really useful way to get people kind of moving in amongst each other and having a proper experience, which helps to kind of embed learning. And also at the same time, the organization that I was working for, I had developed a deck of coaching cards with a couple of my colleagues, which was really useful for about 300 leaders to use one-to-one in one-to-one meetings and team meetings to help embed the organizational values of this organization, as well as using it as a coaching tool. And of course, when the pandemic hit, a lot of the leaders were then saying to me, well, these cards are all well and good, Darren, but how can we use them effectively, now that we're in a kind of virtual environment? And that got my little brain ticking about, how could I potentially put this online to create that interactive experience? Whilst at the same time, one of my side interests, and I run this kind of little social group, is tabletop gaming and playing card games, and so it's something that I love doing anyway. So anything related to cards and games, then I'm there essentially. So for me, it was kind of combined passion of learning and development creating interactive experiences and one of my hobbies. And then I thought, how am I going to turn that into something that I can use on screen through screen share to make that interactive experience for people, and just get away from the constant kind of PowerPoint presentations that you see online, and just it creates a facilitated tool that also helps to control the interactions and bring people in and get them to engage more. So that's when the idea of ipsodeckso.com was born, and I started talking to developers, and the rest, as I say, is history. After that, it was just a case of, once the platform was kind of there, it was just creating all different card decks for it around coaching, training, psychometrics, leadership development, people development, and all the different kind of facets that come into L&D, really. So I've put a whole library of card decks in there for people to be able to use and have fun in their virtual experiences.
Oh, that's incredible. And I just have to ask you, how have you found that transition from being, I guess, employed to now leading your own business to success?
It's been really interesting, because the one thing that I hadn't really focused on that much prior to setting up my own business was my support network. So obviously within the organizations that I've been working, I have support networks within those organizations, because you naturally just work with all different people in different departments. But when I came to look at my own support network outside of that, I hadn't really kind of developed that much. And also, I guess, again, relating back to my introversion, I hadn't put that much effort into doing that, because I was I just wasn't focused on my external world, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it led me to start focusing more on that external world and developing contacts and a network on the outside, which again is outside of my comfort zone. So it's that's been really interesting. And as well as that, obviously, when you're creating a business and in your head you think, I'm going to create this business and it's going to deliver this function or service or whatever it is, but you're not thinking, I'm going to have to be an accountant, I'm going to have to be a marketer, I'm going to have to be a networker, I'm going to all the different facets of things that you need to learn. As you will well know yourself, Paula, you've got to learn about developing, automated email processes and newsletters and all manner of things. So so yeah, it's being aware, I suppose, that there's a lot more to it than just having an idea and thinking, yes, that's going to happen overnight and it's going to work really well. So there's a lot of hard work in there, but it really is worth it, because you're developing something that you can be proud of, is going to make a difference, and it means something to you. And as as you would very often discuss with me, if it fits with your purpose, then it's something that no matter how hard it is, you'll drive it forward and you'll make it work, because you've got a passion for it. So yeah.
Yeah, and if nothing else that people learn about you today, Darren, and they'll be learning lots, believe me, but that you're definitely passionate and around the creativity and wanting to get that interactivity and that curiosity going with the people that you create, workshops and things for. And that really comes through when you understand the heart and soul that's gone into creating ipsodeckso to make that possible for all those curious leaders out there to really get involved in making leadership learning together fun again. It's gone are the days when we are all just in a room, listening to death by PowerPoint, as you put it, which is such a funny phrase. It always makes me smile, but it's so true. And to be able to do these things in different ways, and let people have some say in how they do it, because I understand that a lot of the games that you have on the ipsodeckso site are all, you have a degree of choice in there. People get to choose how they interact with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's different ways of playing many of the games, to be honest with you, and some of the instructions that I put in there is, this is one way of doing it, here's an alternate way of doing it. But also a lot of the things, the games in there can be quite short and just used as icebreakers, or you can make much longer sessions out of them. And as I said earlier, you can use them in training sessions, but there's a lot in there too that can be used in team meetings and things, just so that leaders can just get in there, open one of the decks up and start, having a really good session with their teams to get to know each other better. So, and plus there's lots of useful decks in there that coaches or leaders can use just one-to-one with people. So it's got I think it's got everything, that people would need, really. So I'm really excited about
it. Fantastic. And when can we expect ipsodeckso to be out there for us to try it for real?
Okay, well, I'm certainly hoping that the launch will be in advance of or around the time that this broadcast goes live, actually. So the stage that I'm at with it at the moment is it's about to go into testing with beta users. So I'll be speaking to you actually within the next few days with regards to discussing a login for it, so that you can have access and have a play with it and use in some of your sessions. But obviously with the testing period, that will need to go on for a little while. At the end of the testing period, whilst the testing period is going on, there's a few other little things to sort out with regards to memberships and automations, and then I think kind of 6 to 8 weeks and it should be live online and accessible to everybody. So
so exciting, Darren, and I'm honoured. I can't wait to get my login. That's going to be such great fun to have a go and really get involved in what it is you've been working on for the last year. I guess it's been in the making, and aren't we all so lucky that your leadership journey led you to this point? And what an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, because when people say, "Oh, tell me about your leadership story," people often think, "Oh gosh, this is going to be a CV of the jobs that Darren's had over the last 20 years." Well, it wasn't that at all. It was so interesting to hear the different things that come into it and how all these different experiences make you who you are today. And I'm heartfelt thanks to you, Darren, for really showing up today and sharing all the things that make you who you are.
And whilst we're on the subject of thanking, I can't thank you enough just for the help that you've given me over the past year, really. So many things that I perhaps wouldn't have thought of, and just the support that I've needed along the way. You've been there for me and it's really appreciated.
Oh, you're so welcome. And as you know, with these things, you talked about that support earlier. Having that support as an entrepreneur is absolutely crucial, because when you're a solo person in your own business, it's really hard to bounce ideas with a brick wall, because it doesn't give you any feedback. So, you have to build that great support network around you. And I am so grateful to you too for having helped me. And I must just share with our fantastic listeners that had I not had a session with you, Darren, I'd still be wandering around in the dark, is probably the easiest way to say it, wondering how my podcast was ever going to come to life and what it might be called and all the rest of it. And whilst I came up with the name myself, I'm happy to say you really helped me get clarity. And that's what we're here for, is to help each other to really show up as our best and get the best out of the things that we want to do. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me along.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Why don't you now take a moment to reflect on what you've heard and see what resonates for you? You never know, there may be some golden nuggets in there that really make sense to you and you'd like to apply in your leadership. Who knows what's possible? We all bring that different uniqueness to the way that we lead ourselves in all walks of our lives. I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and I really look forward to seeing you next time on Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Bye for now.